Today, in the world of religion and government and secret societies, there's a very important facet to the connection between governments and religions by secret societies, and that is the use of the planet Saturn. Saturn is referred to in the ancient world as Lord of the Rings. Well, of course, he is the Lord of the Rings. And men were told to, when they get married, to get married before your Lord, and you wear a wedding ring. Circles and rings were used in different religious events. In order to show you the importance of the planet Saturn in religion, generally speaking, throughout the world, I think it would be appropriate to give you some ideas about the original Hebrew religion and where it came from, and then how it has progressed over the years until today. Saturn dominates the Hebrew religion. It also dominates many of the other religions of the world in the Middle East. Originally, there was ancient religion, but it wasn't Hebrew or Jewish. Going back to the Middle East, we find that it was probably more Egyptian than it was Jewish. But the Jewish people, or what we call the Jewish people, back then, at that time, the dominating worship at the time in Egypt and the whole Middle East was the worship of the moon. And moon worship was very important. The Egyptians especially put a lot of importance on the worship of the moon. Well, the moon god, if you are in Egypt and you're looking east, in the middle of the Sinai desert is an enormously high mountain range. And so the people on the Egyptian side of the Sinai would look eastward, and every evening, about 6 o'clock, the moon would come up from the mountain. The moon became known as the old man of the mountain. And the moon name, the old man's name was Sin. S-I-N was the name of a moon god to the ancient world in the Middle East. And the mountain was Ai, so you put the two together, Sin and Ai, becomes Mount Sinai. Well, that's where Mount Sinai is said to be, is in the Sinai desert. And this is why the Hebrews today, as they did many hundreds of years ago, they have a lunar calendar based on the moon. They trace their beginnings of each day from sundown to sundown. Why? Because that's when the moon comes out, is from sundown to sundown. First of all was the moon. Later on, Jupiter comes into the picture in ancient Hebrew worship. Jupiter, because in the ancient world, Pater, P-A-T-A-R, or P-A-T-E-R. And in the Phoenician Canaanite language, it was a Piter, P-I-T-E-R. The ancient name for the Jews was I-U, in the King's English, the old King's English, for the word Jew. It wasn't spelled J-E-W, it was spelled I-U or I-O-U. So I-U was Jew, and Pater was the father. So it became known as the father of the Jews was I-U Pater, where I's and J's are interchangeable. So now it becomes J-U Pater, or Jupiter. Jupiter now becomes very important in the Jewish religion, and then from the changing of the astrological age of Aries, from blowing the ram's horn to Pisces, you now move into the Christian age. Today we have, in the Vatican, we have a statue of Saint Peter. No, it's not Peter, it's Pater, Father God, Pater. And you put J-U in front of it, it becomes Jupiter. That's at the beginning of the Christian dispensation. And now, within the last 500 years, 400 or 500 years, Jupiter has now been eclipsed and has kind of gone into quiet. And now the main planet today is Saturn. Saturn is referred to as the Lord of the Rings. And as we said, that Saturn is today actually the god of the Hebrews today. In the old Phoenician Canaanite language, you spell the name Saturn, S-H-A-B-B-A-T-H, Shabbat. And so if you're going to worship the planet Saturn, the Shabbat, you do it on something called the Sabbath. So when you hear in the Ten Commandments, remember to keep holy the Sabbath. Sabbath is the Phoenician name for the planet Saturn. Saturn, as a god, was always called the god of the black robe. Black is a very important color in both Judaism and the Catholic Church and Christianity because black represents Saturn. Saturn is the god who is a judge over all mankind. That's why judges in courtrooms wear a black robe. Shabbat also has another interpretation. Saturn is the seventh planet. He's also sometimes represented as the Grim Reaper, Father Time. Very interesting, all the little details about Saturn and its numbers applying to it and the colors and all of that. We get our idea about chronology from Saturn, so we have something called a calendar, chronia, the calendar. Saturn was Chronos in Greek. Another reason why Saturn was important is because Saturn was understood to be the inhibitor, one who holds you back in life. That's why when you are celebrating your God on the Sabbath, you do no work. Because the ancients said if Saturn is the inhibitor who holds us back, then we won't do anything. He doesn't have to hold us back. We'll just not do anything on Sabbath. The reason why that Saturn became known as the inhibitor, and because it circled, ancient man didn't know there were any other planets out past Saturn, so they assumed that he's the bottom line. He's the one that holds us together. Saturn is still important in Middle Eastern religions, Arabic religions. The Star of David is a six-pointed star. Well, six-pointed star is actually referred to by the reference works as a hex, a hexagram. Hex simply means six, which incidentally, in the Bible, 6 is the number of a man. How do you spell 6 in Latin? It's sex, S-E-X. So 6 is a six-pointed star. And today the Jews call it the Star of David, but the encyclopedias will show you that as six-pointed star is a hex, and it will tell you that it was originally the star of Saturn. So in the ancient world, some priests would draw a circle on the ground and draw a triangle, and then they would put another triangle obverse going the other way, which makes it a six-pointed star, and then they would be able to step inside of the circle and into the star and cast a spell on you. And so the idea was they put the hex on you. In 1977, NASA sent out the Voyager, and as that probe moved out into space, it passed over Saturn. And as it passed over Saturn, it happened to go close to the North Pole of Saturn. For some reason, on the North Pole of Saturn is a hexagram, a six-pointed hexagram on the North Pole of Saturn. scientists cannot explain how there is a six-pointed star on the North Pole of Saturn, and what's even worse to try and explain is how come the Jews knew that Saturn was connected to 6 in a hexagram. Somehow or another the Jews knew that six-pointed star was somehow connected to Saturn. There was no way for us to know until 77, when the space probe went across. NASA had to explain to us that it was simply a fluke. It was something that just happened, nothing to be concerned about. Then like 40 years later, when the Cassini craft goes out, that same hexagram is still there on Saturn. It wasn't just a little fluke. It's there on Saturn even today. In the motion picture Lord of the Rings, Sauron is portrayed as an evil eye. If you go to the South Pole of Saturn, you will see what as altogether looks like an eye, the all-seeing eye. However, if you think about the planet Saturn with its rings, if you turn the angle just right, now the rings look like two separate eyelids with the center circle as the eye. So there's a lot of mysticism connected to the planet Saturn, the Jewish religion, the Catholic Church and the Catholic religion. Even Islam today has a symbol of Saturn that is dominantly important to Islam. And it was a black square or a black cube. And the black cube represents the planet Saturn. Well, that's what Mecca is in Saudi Arabia, is a black cube, a black square. All over the world, large black cubes in architecture and churches and monasteries, huge black square cubes, just like Mecca. In the movie 2001, Space Odyssey, in the book, the original book on that gave birth to the movie, in the book it was the astronauts were going to the planet Saturn to find this black cube. There again is the black cube in the planet Saturn. Anyone who studies the dark arts, the dark sciences, or the world of the occult knows that Saturn is very important to the dark side of this world in relation to religion and occultism. Saturn is the inhibitor. It'll set you back and teach you a lesson. Saturn represented government, military, the police department, governmental agencies. The Saturnalia was the celebration in Rome for the planet Saturn. And it happened like 13 days before the 25th. So it was like 12 days before what we call today Christmas. But it was the 12 days before, and it was called Saturnalia because Saturn was in Rome considered to be the god of chaos. That was another thing he was known for. What the Romans did with worshiping Saturn, they actually had 12 days of chaos in which the kings would bow to slaves and prisoners were let loose and they would be in charge of their masters who put them in prison. There was alcohol and sex and drugs and whatever you wanted. In the Roman Empire, you're free to do whatever it is you want to do. And so if you're a slave, when Saturnalia comes, you can go to the house of your master and bring him out and make him bow down and kiss your feet. So the idea was it was a chaotic time in which all law was just thrown away. And now it was up to anybody, whatever it is you want, go out and get it and take it. Today we call it Christmas. In the Roman Empire, the Saturnalia. And then there was a Brumalia, which was based on the worship of Saturn too. A very important NASA scientist named Norman Berglund has written a book called The Ring Makers of Saturn. And in that book, Norman Berglund, the scientist, shows actual pictures taken of the rings of Saturn, and one in particular has some sort of a vehicle, space vehicle, that is creating another ring. And it's not quite finished, so there's a ring on this side, and there is some kind of a space vehicle creating the ring, and it's almost ready to connect the ring, but it's not quite. And so we got some beautiful pictures, and it's going to ultimately connect it together, and that'll be a new ring in Saturn. So we know that the rings are artificial. Somebody's made them. I was speaking up in a conference in San Francisco a few years ago. He came over to me, and I wasn't expecting that. And he said, "Jordan, I've come here to meet you. I want to talk with you in private." And so we went back into the back of the restaurant and sat there, and he says, "I'm here to tell you something. I've come here. After I talk to you, I'm going home." And he said, "But you've been talking about the planet Saturn. I want to show you some things about Saturn you don't know." And so he pulls out some pictures. He had some pictures and NASA pictures. So he said, "But what we do know is that it's inhabited." My question was, could the rings be like a dish for communication in deep space? Because we have television dishes, the big dishes. Maybe the rings could be some kind of a communication device that can send out or receive from extreme distances, hundreds of light years away, with this dish set up. And he said, "Well, that's interesting. I don't know, that much about that idea." Saturn is a very important planet that balances out the positions of other stars. Jupiter and Saturn dominate our solar system. They're so large. Saturn is important in not only its physical qualities of being able to exert energy fields and sounds, but it also goes back into ancient history, which makes it really interesting. How did the ancient peoples know so much about the planet Saturn, and also associate Saturn, as they did, with dark mystical forces? Saturn is probably the dominant figure in dark religions today, in the occult world, metaphysics. Saturn plays a prominent part in all magical systems. As a matter of fact, in Germany today, there is a very powerful secret society called the Brotherhood of Saturn. The books written about them say they are probably the most important secret society on the face of the earth. They are connected behind the scenes to all kinds of powerful organizations, governments, secret societies. I think the darkness associated with the planet Saturn and the occult religions of the world has to do with some actual, in fact, influence that Saturn has on the human race that the Jewish people realized that we didn't realize. And they probably got the idea from other ancient cultures that also venerated the planet Saturn. I am convinced that the world we live in is being dominated by an extraterrestrial presence. And I think that extraterrestrial presence is the one who is feeding us our ideas about theology, religion, the occult world, governmental systems, churches. And somehow the older teachers were knowledgeable about planet Saturn. But David Icke has been talking about this too for a long time, that Saturn is a very important planet to the occult world. And it is, because if you do any research into occultism, secret societies, Freemasonry, you will find that Saturn dominates the whole subject. I think that we have been on this earth, we humans, the way we live today, we've been on this earth with other life forms, other higher and far more intelligent and creative life forms that we really haven't looked at very closely and haven't really thought much about it. But when you do that kind of research into the things which are found on the earth that we can't explain, pyramids on the floor of the ocean and great temples in the Pacific and in the Atlantic Ocean, and the pyramids of Egypt and all of the wondrous, beautiful structures of the ancient and prehistoric world. There are just too many indications that there's a higher civilization that has been on this earth than we are, far higher. They understood the universe far better than we do even today. And so the Aztec, Mayas, the Incas, the Toltec peoples, the Egyptians, Babylonians, Sumerians, all of these ancient cultures were far, far smarter than we are. We've been learning from them. Our numerical system comes from Babylon. Our understanding of our religions and the concepts in our religions come from Egypt, come from the Hindus, the ancient Hindus. So I am totally convinced, as many other researchers and writers on the subject, that we are not as wonderful as we think we are, but there were far more civilizations that were far more adept at science and taught us today. They taught us. I believe that we're being manipulated even today by what we call government and governmental officials. But if you look at the history going back 6,000 years, it seems as though there's always been an overshadowing intelligence behind our evolution and our destiny. Someone as smarter than we are has been guiding us. The idea that we have been created by a higher form of life, a higher civilization has created us. It implies that they, in creating us, have purposely not given us full potential, because you don't do that with a new experiment. You just bring it along little by little and guide it the way you want it to develop. And so we don't have the wherewithal, intellectually speaking, to break away from the masters who have created this earth and seem to feel that they own us and that they can control us. We don't really have the wherewithal. And I think the reason why is because knowledge is power. And if you don't understand some of this hidden knowledge and hidden history of who we are and how we got here, if you don't understand that, you're never going to understand why we don't have the power that we could have if we joined together. Even in the biblical understanding of the creation of man, it says that God made man and woman in his image after his likeness. And so it tells us something about our Creator by looking at ourselves. Because if our Creator was like us and we are in that image and likeness, then there are many good people who are working to help the human family and help to educate and to protect, while there's many bad who want to just use us for slaves. So I think that there are good extraterrestrial life forms here who want to see us progress, but they also are aware that we should not become too smart, because if we become too smart and too clever, we may be presenting more trouble for everyone else out there in the universe, because we're already talking about going out to the stars and setting up new civilizations on other planets. But the extraterrestrials look at us and think, wait a minute, you're talking about coming out to the stars and setting up new civilizations like the one you've got on Earth today? I don't think so. With all the violence and pornography and drug addiction and murder and all the bad blood among peoples, and you're going to bring that out into the universe? You better think about that. I think the bottom line on this is that there are two sides to the story. There are some good extraterrestrials, aliens, and there are some who are evil. Same thing can be said for the human family. But that doesn't mean everyone's bad. It just means the ones who are bad are more vocal, and you see what they're doing. Because of the conditions that the world that we live in today exhibits, that there is a dark force in this world that tends to cause man heartache and tragedy and drug addiction and alcoholism. And I think, this is just my opinion, but I think that the reason why there is so much, again, drug addiction, alcoholism, the movement toward I and me and I want what I want, I think all of that is part of the frustration of the human family that realizes it's capable of so much more, but that the powers that be over us keep us down. They won't let you. If you're too smart, you're going to be in trouble. The government doesn't want you too smart unless you're working for the government. I think when we were being created, we were being created with some kind of an inborn or hardwired complex in us that we want to look to something higher. We want to look to a father. We want to have a mother and father, and they take care of us, and they make all the decisions for us, so we can just go out and play and have fun as children, because we have the authorities who take care of us. And so I think that stays with the human race, because all we are today, all the adults on the earth today are just grown-up children. Most adults think like children. They don't have an education of a really well-informed adult. And so I think that's the problem, is that our makers, and whoever they were, want to keep us ignorant, because that way they can control you better. I mean, when you start getting too smart, you start asking the wrong kind of questions. And now you're going to be in trouble, because now you, as an investigative reporter, you're starting to look at things going on in this world that you're not supposed to talk about. The best way to control people is to keep them frightened and confused. Because if the humanity, even the Bible said basically that if the human race were to ever put down its arms and stop fighting each other and join together and use their minds and use their spirits, that they would be invincible, that they would be an incredible civilization on this earth of extraordinarily brilliant creatures, human beings. And so to keep that from happening, because if we get too smart, our creators, or those who think that they own us and control us, will have bigger problems trying to control us. So they keep us ignorant and ill-informed and unread and fighting among ourselves like children. That keeps us out of their way, so that they don't do what we do. They don't fight each other. So I think that there is something to the idea that there is an extraterrestrial presence in our solar system, and it has been communicating with certain humans on the earth, giving them knowledge. And so the knowledge is now out there that Saturn is very important to the extraterrestrial world. I'm Jordan Maxwell, and thank you for watching.